Welcome to Daily Dose of Knowledge. You have probably watched someone stay in a relationship that was destroying them. Maybe that someone was you. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. What you are about to hear will change how you see love, loyalty, and the limits of the human mind. They knew it was bad. Everyone around them knew it was bad, and they stayed anyway. Not because they were weak. Not because they were stupid. Because their brain had been rewired to need the very thing that was hurting them. This is trauma bonding. And it is one of the most misunderstood psychological phenomena in human relationships. The term was first introduced by psychologist Patrick Carnez in 1997. He used it to describe powerful emotional attachments that form between abuse victims and their abusers. Not affection, not love. A bond forged by the cycle of harm and relief, damage and repair. Pain and comfort delivered by the same hands. To understand why it works, you have to understand one of the most powerful mechanisms in behavioral psychology. Intermittent reinforcement. The principle that unpredictable rewards create stronger behavioral patterns than consistent ones. B.F. Skinner demonstrated this with pigeons. Animals rewarded randomly, not every time, not never, but unpredictably became the most persistent, the most desperate. Casinos are built on this principle. Slot machines do not pay out every pull. They pay out sometimes, unpredictably. And that unpredictability is precisely what makes them impossible to walk away from. Toxic relationships operate on the same mechanism. Some days there is warmth, some days there is coldness. The brain does not conclude that the relationship is bad. It concludes that the reward is coming. It just needs to hold on a little longer. And holding on becomes a compulsion. The brain has been trained, without its knowledge or consent, to chase the good moments through the bad ones. The neurochemistry confirms it. When the abuser returns to kindness after cruelty, the brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter released by cocaine. The relief is not just emotional, it is chemical. And chemicals do not respond to logic. They respond to reinforcement. This is why telling someone in a trauma bond to just leave produces the same result as telling an addict to just stop. The advice is technically correct, it is functionally useless. The brain has built a dependency. And dependency does not dissolve because someone explains that it should. There is a second mechanism at work. Cortisol, the stress hormone that floods the body during conflict and threat. In a trauma bond, cortisol levels are chronically elevated. The nervous system is in permanent low-grade alarm. Hypervigilant, scanning constantly for the next shift in the abuser's mood. And when the tension finally breaks, when the conflict ends and the abuser returns to warmth, the cortisol drops. The drop itself feels like relief so profound it registers as love. The body cannot distinguish between the relief of danger passing and the feeling of being genuinely cared for. Both produce the same internal sensation. So the person in the trauma bond experiences the end of cruelty as affection, the cessation of pain as tenderness. The abuser becomes associated with both the wound and the healing. That association is the trap. It is built not by character weakness, but by neurological conditioning operating entirely below conscious awareness. Now let us talk about the cycle itself. Because trauma bonds do not form in chaos. They form in a pattern. Phase 1 is idealization. Intense affection. Attention. The abuser makes the target feel uniquely seen, uniquely chosen. Psychologists call this love bombing. An overwhelming flood of positive attention designed to create deep attachment before the pattern reveals itself. The attachment formed during love bombing becomes the reference point. The standard the target spends the rest of the relationship trying to return to. Phase 2 is devaluation. The warmth withdraws. Criticism begins. The target, already attached, tries harder, adjusts, apologizes for things that are not their fault. They are chasing the person they met at the beginning. That person still appears occasionally, enough to sustain the hope, not enough to satisfy it. Phase 3 is the explosion, cruelty, rage, humiliation. The form it takes varies. The function is the same. Total destabilization of the target's sense of self. Phase 4 is reconciliation. The abuser returns, apologizes, promises. The warmth floods back in. The dopamine fires. The cortisol drops. and the target experiences something that feels indistinguishable from love. Then the cycle begins again. And every repetition deepens the bond, not weakens it, deepens it. Because every time the target survives the bad phase and reaches the good one, the brain records that survival as evidence that holding on works. The bond is not a failure of love, it is a product of it. The target loves genuinely. The bond is what happens when genuine love is systematically exploited by intermittent cruelty. Now let us talk about why leaving is so neurologically difficult. Because it is not just emotional. It is physiological. The abuser has become a regulatory object. The target's nervous system has outsourced its regulation to the abuser. When the abuser is in a good phase, the nervous system calms. When the abuser is absent, the nervous system destabilizes. Leaving does not feel like freedom. It feels like losing the only source of calm in a body that has forgotten how to produce calm on its own. This is why so many people in trauma bonds return after leaving. Not because they do not know the relationship is harmful. Because the body registers absence as more painful than harm. It takes an average of 7 attempts before a person in an abusive relationship leaves for good. That is not weakness. That is documented neurological reality. There is also isolation. Abusers systematically reduce the target's outside connections. Family, friends, sources of perspective that exist outside the relationship. The isolation is rarely dramatic, it is subtle. A comment about a friend, a complaint about time spent elsewhere. A gradual narrowing of the world until the abuser is the primary source of everything. Information, comfort, social contact, financial access, identity itself. When the abuser becomes the entire world, leaving that world feels like annihilation, not just of the relationship, of the self. Trauma bonding also produces a specific cognitive distortion. The target begins to see the relationship through the abuser's frame. Their worth is measured by the abuser's assessment. Their memories of events are gradually replaced by the abuser's version of those events. Psychologists call this gaslighting. The systematic replacement of the target's reality with the abuser's preferred version of it. Over time, the target loses confidence in their own perception. They stop trusting what they see, what they feel, what they remember. And from inside that distortion, leaving seems not just difficult but genuinely irrational. So how does a trauma bond break? The answer is slow, nonlinear, and physiological as much as psychological. The first step is recognition. Not just intellectual acknowledgement that the relationship is harmful. A deeper recognition that what is being felt is not love but neurological conditioning. That the warmth felt when the abuser is kind is dopamine. That the calm felt in their presence is cortisol dropping. None of those sensations are evidence of the relationship's worth. The second step is rebuilding the nervous system's capacity for self-regulation. This takes time. It requires consistent safety. Trauma-informed therapy, EMDR somatic approaches, addresses the physiological dimension of the bond, not just the cognitive one. The third step is rebuilding the external world that was systematically dismantled, the friendships, the family connections, the independent sources of identity. This is slow. Some of those connections were damaged beyond repair. New ones must be built from the ground up. The final thing to understand is this. Surviving a trauma bond is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of extraordinary endurance under neurological siege. The people who stay are not failing to leave. They are surviving a dependency their brain did not choose and was never asked to consent to. Understanding that, the difference between moral failure and neurological conditioning, is the beginning of genuine compassion. For others, and for yourself. If this gave you something real, subscribe to Daily Dose of Knowledge. Drop a comment with what you now understand about staying that you did not understand before. Explore our videos on psychology, human behavior, self-help, science, history, relationships, and the forces shaping modern life. There is always something here that will shift the way you think.